when they hit a plateau so many times, and this could happen many weeks or months down the road, but when people hit a plateau, they generally get discouraged and they bail on that. So do you have any thoughts or advice on what happens when these people get discouraged or hit a plateau?
Right. The issue is that this is a very interesting principle that once you grasp it, it sort of puts you in control of understanding what's happening. People need to understand the concept of an equilibrium. So let me give you an example. If you have a boat floating on a calm lake, and it's floating 1 foot under the water, the hull, a little tiny sabot kind of a boat, and then you step in that sabot and you lie down, then your extra weight pushes the boat down further in the water, and now we're 18 inches below the water line. And then you get out of the boat, and then it goes back to a foot under the water. And then you had some big old jugs of water in the boat, and you take those out, and now it goes above, rises further in the water, and now it's only 8 inches deep in the water. In other words, it's going back and forth where it stands relative to the water line, dependent upon the gravitational forces that are involved in the boat. Now, that's exactly what your weight is doing. Your weight is simply moving around. It's moving towards an equilibrium, and then it'll hit an equilibrium. When you step in the boat, it's actually in disequilibrium for a few minutes as the boat now is bumping up and down in the water, as the dynamics of that situation are not stable. As soon as you settle down, now you're down 18 inches in the water and it's stable. Your weight is essentially a math problem that involves very few variables. One of them is your genetics. The second is how much exercise that you're doing. And the third is the content of your diet. And all of them are actually important, but the most important are your genetics and the content of your diet. Exercise is a third variable in this that is not as significant, but it does exist. Now, so we could have a person who, let's suppose that they're eating a conventional American diet and they're 40 years old and they're 50 pounds overweight. And what they hear is, they've gone on diets before where they try to restrict their calories for a while and push themselves away from the table, and they walk around the block and they lose 6 pounds, and then they give up. And as soon as they stop doing this, they go back to their 40 pounds overweight, and they say, "Well, that's my set point." Okay, and that's what people believe. That's my set point. That is not a set point. There is actually no such thing as a set point. What there is that there's an equilibrium point if your exercise and your diet and your genes are stable. And since your genes are always basically stable, the two variables that are in the equation are what is it that you're eating and what your exercise process is. So let me give you an example. A man came to me up at a lecture, he and his wife. They were in their 70s. And he came up and he told me a story. And he was about 5'8", about 160 pounds. And he said, "I used to be 380 pounds, which to me was unbelievable that was true." And his wife is sitting there nodding her head and smiling. And what he did was he went on the McDougall program. And so at 380 pounds, he went on the McDougall program. And over the next year, he lost about 100 pounds. So he lost about 2 pounds a week, which means we knew that he was really doing it. And then he hit, quote, a plateau. He hit a plateau in the upper twos. And there he sat for several months. And he still knows that he's 100 pounds overweight, obviously. And so he called John McDougall and he said, "I'm 100 pounds overweight and I'm doing your program perfectly. What's the deal?" And McDougall says, "Are you doing any exercise?" And he says, "No." And McDougall said, "Walk around the block once a day." Okay? So the man genetically could not get away with no exercise. He needed to actually walk around his block once a day, which he then did. And in the next year, he lost 120 pounds. So now he did hit a set point, quote, he hit biological optimum at about 160 pounds. And that's where you will sit, and in this case, at an appropriate level exercise for him and an appropriate diet for humans, and the problem is solved. Now, had he only walked around the block halfway, he might have wound up at 225 pounds. There's no there are an infinite number of combinations that he could have hit 243 pounds. He could have put 184 pounds. In other words, there's an infinite number of set points that people will hit or plateaus, but you have not actually hit any biological limit. What we've hit is a equilibrium for your genetics and your activity level and your diet. And all you must do at that point is to either clean up the diet a little more or start to exercise, and you will not maintain excess weight. Maintaining excess weight on an organism is inconsistent with the natural history of all species. You are not designed to carry around extra weight that is a biological impairment. Your genes will help you out of this trap if you do the right things and you do them long enough and well enough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good. I essentially look at calories in and out, and I know there's things, fats and carbs and all that work in different ways, but it's a good estimate to me, because there's a lot of denial about like what they're eating essentially, and so you forget what you ate. And you ate more than somebody might have eaten more than they were aware of. So or did things that they didn't think was going to be a problem. There's a lot of people that say, I'm not really doing the diet, but I'm not getting the results. And so I kind of, you have to be gentle, but we're trying to say like, do the 95. I mean, you don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect, but I think in general, there's a lot of things going off plan more than people are aware of that's affecting the results.
There's something that they really don't know about. Sometimes people are very sincere and they're doing a very good job as best they know, and there's a few mistakes that they could be making that they're not aware of. One of the mistakes that people are unaware of is that when they process food in their own blender, that this is actually can be a problem. So they might not understand that when you soften food artificially, let's suppose that they're making soups and juices and smoothies, and they think that this is a great thing because the basic foodstuffs are very healthy. This can keep weight on people. And the reason why this is true is that your digestive system was designed by nature to signal to you how much food to eat, depending upon a series of receptor processes that go on during digestion. If you disturb those processes by essentially pre-digesting food in a blender, that you put food through steel teeth, moving 1,000 miles an hour, that obliterate the fibrous matrix of food, and then you drink those calories, then your stomach does not have to go through the muscular contractions that are necessary in order to digest the food, and also the stretch process where there's been food sitting in the stomach of X amount of calories for X amount of time does not occur because the food's been pre-digested. It will move more quickly from the stomach to the small intestine, and therefore it will not feel like you ate 300 calories. It'll feel like you ate 150 calories. And so people need to know that this is actually a fairly substantial issue. And in fact, experiments have shown that when you soften food substantially, you will effectively reduce the calories needed to digest it by 12.5% or so. So what you're effectively doing is adding 12.5% of calories to your food. Well, we talked about earlier that the average American woman is gaining about 20 calories a day over her lifetime. That's not very much. She's systematically overeating by 1%. Instead of eating about 2,000 calories, maybe she's eating 2,020. That is enough to actually have her maintain a very substantial excess weight load on her body. So that if the system is fooled enough, it can miss it by 1%. When you start blending food and using those sort of techniques, nut butters, for example, people will feel like, well, all the data says that nuts are fine and that, the experts say that nuts are healthy, whole natural food. They are. But a nut butter is not a whole natural food. And it seems like it is. It feels like it should be, but it's not. And as a result, what you've done when you put those nuts through those steel teeth and make a nut butter, you've systematically increased the caloric concentration of that food by 12.5%. It's like you added some oil to it. And as a result of that, when they have done animal experiments on this, you'll see animals get fat on exactly the same food, but where the food has been processed in this way. So, for example, hamburger is substantially more calorie dense than the steak that it comes from. Not because there's actually any more calories in it if you counted calories in a calorie counter, but as far as the animal is concerned that's digesting it, it's 12.5% more concentrated in calories. That's a very substantive issue for people, and it's a really important, honest mistake that they can be making. That's why one of the cues here is we say whole natural foods. Whole natural foods. That's the thing that you don't want to miss. Whole natural foods means whole. Try to eat the foods as much as possible in the way that they came out of nature, that your ancestors would have eaten them. If you do that, you will not systematically overeat, and you'll get the life that you deserve.
Yeah, because Dr. Greger did a video, and he was, people used to, a lot of people saying the smoothies and the, you're blending it and breaking down the fiber, and then he was sort of saying, why does people eat soup? Like Jeff Novick and that, they recommend, you start with a salad and a soup and then the meal. And one of the things with soup is because you're eating with a spoon and it's hot, you generally eat it slower. Because people were saying with smoothies, you should chew it or something to make it, to make it seem like you're chewing it. But they showed that, that was the main issue, was the speed of the eating. So he was basically saying that with a smoothie, because the smoothies are, at one point were showing that problem, but they were like, you could drink it pretty quickly, you could scarf it down pretty quickly, but if you had it at the same rate as like a soup, that you can sort of mimic that effect just because it's slowing down the entry.
Now, I would say this, that when it comes to these sorts of foods, I give them a B. This is healthy food, and we process them some, and this is not any big crisis. However, if you're somebody who has hit an equilibrium and you're 25 pounds overweight, you were 50 pounds overweight, now you're 25 and you've hit an equilibrium, and you're eating what you think is really healthy food, one place to look is how much of the food are you processing in this way. Yeah. And so that's for other people who are doing well and they are losing weight and they are moving towards a very healthy equilibrium, and they're using smoothies and blended soups, my attitude is fine, have at it. I'd have no problem with this. But keep in mind that I would say probably the biggest culprit, though, is when we start adding nuts and seeds into blended food, because people can then, they can start eating a lot more of these high-fat foods pretty easily, and that can be a problem.
Yeah.